Sometime in the 1980s, an anthropologist named Nancy Yaw Davis began keeping a private list. On it, she wrote down things about the Zuni people of New Mexico that did not seem to fit. Their language, which is related to no other language anywhere, a rare kidney disease that appeared among them far more often than it should, blood types that looked wrong for the region, ceremonies and symbols that reminded her uneasily of somewhere else entirely, and a Zuni tradition about ancestors who had traveled a great distance in search of a place called the Middle Place. One by one, these were curiosities. Stacked together, Davis thought they formed a shape, and the shape pointed across an ocean toward medieval Japan. In the year 2000, she published that idea as a book called The Zuni Enigma. The Zuni themselves have always known exactly who they are and where they belong. But the puzzle Davis assembled is real, and it raises a question that sits right at the edge of what evidence can settle. When a single people turns out to be this different from everyone around them, is that the trace of a forgotten journey, or is it just what happens when the human mind goes looking for patterns? To weigh that honestly, we have to start not with the theory, but with the genuinely strange facts underneath it, beginning with the Zuni homeland itself. Zuni Pueblo sits in western New Mexico, near the Arizona line, in a landscape of red mesas and dry washes. The Zuni call their main village Halona Idiwana, the Middle Place, and people have lived in this area continuously for a very long time, through the era of the great ancestral Puebloan towns and into the present day. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in North America, and it sits inside a crowded map of languages. To the west, the Hopi speak a language that belongs to the wide Uto-Aztecan family, which stretches all the way down into Mexico. To the east, the people of Acoma and Laguna speak Quezon. The Rio Grande Pueblos include speakers of Tanoan languages. The southwest is a mosaic of related and traceable tongues. And then there is Zuni, which belongs to none of them. Zuni is what linguists call a language isolate. That is a technical term with a precise meaning. It means that after generations of careful study, no one has been able to establish a genealogical relationship between Zuni and any other language on Earth. It is not a strange branch of Uto-Aztecan. It is not a distant cousin of Quezon. It stands alone. There are only a handful of true language isolates in North America, and Zuni is one of the clearest examples. A people sitting at the very center of the Pueblo world, speaking a language connected to no other people at all. That is the anomaly that started everything, and it is completely real. You do not need Nancy Yaw Davis or any theory to find it strange. Every linguist who has ever studied the Southwest agrees that Zuni is an isolate. The question is only what that isolation means. It helps to know that Zuni has been studied hard, not casually. The linguist Stanley Newman produced a detailed grammar and dictionary of the Zuni language in the middle of the 20th century, work that remains foundational. Generations of scholars have combed through Zuni looking for a relative, testing it against Panuchian languages far to the west, against its southwestern neighbors, against almost everything available. Nothing is held up under scrutiny. Isolation, in the case of Zuni, is not a gap waiting to be filled by the next study. It is a conclusion reached after the studies were done. And Zuni is not alone in being alone. Around the world, there are a scattered few languages, like Basque in Europe, that sit outside every known family, survivors of lineages whose other branches did not make it. Zuni is North America's version of that puzzle, standing in the middle of a well-mapped region and refusing to join any of the families around it. Alongside the language, Davis pointed to biology. Studies of the Zuni had turned up an unusual genetic profile compared to neighboring nations, including a higher frequency of type B blood, which is rare among indigenous peoples of the Americas, and an unusually high incidence of a particular kidney disease. These are the kinds of details that do not make headlines, but that nag at a careful researcher. A people who are linguistically alone and also biologically distinctive from their neighbors. The kidney condition in particular haunted her because it was both rare in the general population and, she noted, documented among some Japanese communities as well. A disease is a hard physical thing, not a matter of interpretation, and a shared vulnerability between two peoples on opposite sides of an ocean felt to her like a thread worth pulling. To Davis, the pieces were starting to rhyme. If you enjoy documentaries that take a strange idea seriously and then test it fairly, take a second to subscribe, because it genuinely helps these longer videos reach people who like careful history. Because Davis did not stop at language and blood. She built her whole case out into the open, in print, with her name on it, and that case is worth laying out in full before we take it apart. The book is called The Zuni Enigma, published in the year 2000 by W. W. Norton. Davis was a trained anthropologist, not a hobbyist, and she assembled her argument out of 4 kinds of evidence. The first was language. She lined up Zuni words against old Japanese words and pointed to resemblances. The Zuni word for a rain priest, in the shape of certain religious terms, seemed to echo Japanese forms from many centuries ago. She also noted that Zuni and Japanese share a basic sentence structure, placing the verb at the end. The second kind of evidence was biology, the blood types and the rare kidney disease, which she noted also appeared in Japanese populations. The third was religion. Davis saw parallels between Zuni ceremonial life and elements of Japanese Buddhism, in symbols and ideas about a sacred center in the shape of certain practices. And the fourth was the Zuni oral tradition itself, the account of ancestors migrating in search of the middle place, which Davis read as an echo of a Buddhist idea of a middle world. Davis also had an answer for the hardest practical objection, which is how anyone could have crossed the Pacific at all in that era. She pointed to the Kuroshio Current, the great ocean current that sweeps north and east off the coast of Japan and curves across the northern Pacific toward North America. Boats lost or launched into that current, she argued, could be carried across without needing to navigate the open ocean deliberately. It is the same current invoked in other stories of accidental Pacific drift, and it gave her migration a plausible road. Out of all this, she proposed a specific story. Around the 13th century, more than 700 years ago, a group of Japanese, perhaps Buddhist pilgrims looking for a promised land, crossed the Pacific, reached the coast, and traveled inland, where they merged with an ancestral Puebloan population and helped give rise to the Zuni, their language and their religion. She even read the timing of the Zuni's arrival at the middle place, and a period of change in the archaeological record of the region as marks left by these newcomers. It is a bold, clean, almost cinematic idea. And it is, here, at the moment it sounds most convincing, that an honest documentary has to stop and let the experts who study this for a living respond. Because they do respond, and their verdict is not close. The linguistic core of Davis's argument is the part specialists reject most firmly, and the reasons are worth understanding, because they apply to a whole genre of theories like this one. When you compare any two languages on Earth, you will always find some words that sound alike and share a meaning. With tens of thousands of words in each language, coincidental matches are not just possible, they are guaranteed. The way linguists tell a real family relationship from a pile of coincidences is by looking for systematic sound correspondences, regular patterns, where a particular sound in one language reliably maps to a particular sound in the other across hundreds of words. Real language families, like the one that ties English to Hindi, show these deep, regular patterns. The Zuni and Japanese resemblances do not. They are scattered and erratic, a handful of lucky-looking pairs with no system beneath them. The shared word order fails for the same reason. Placing the verb at the end of the sentence is one of the most common patterns in the world's languages. Roughly half of all human languages do it, including the Zuni's own neighbors, the Hopi and the Karasan speakers. It is evidence of nothing in particular, and the grammars underneath diverge sharply. Zuni marks a distinction between one, two, and many in ways that Japanese simply does not. The closer you look, the less the two languages actually behave alike. It is worth being concrete about how easy the coincidences are. Pick any two unrelated languages, sit with two large dictionaries, and you can assemble a list of look-alike words in an afternoon. English and Persian, languages that are in fact distantly related but not in the way the resemblance suggests, share the pair bad and its Persian near twin, which turns out to be pure chance. The Zuni rain priest term that Davis matched to a Japanese form is one entry on a list of that kind. Impressive one at a time, meaningless as a set, because there is no regular pattern connecting them. This is not a knock on Davis's sincerity. It is the exact trap that the comparative method was invented to catch, and Zuni and Japanese fall straight into it. The biology falls to a quieter, more decisive explanation. When a small population lives somewhat apart for many generations, the frequencies of its genes drift. Rare traits can become common purely by chance, an effect that geneticists call the founder effect. A distinctive blood type profile and an unusual concentration of a rare disease are exactly what you would expect from a small, historically isolated community, with no ocean crossing required at all. And on the hard evidence that a migration would actually leave, there is nothing. No genetic signal of medieval Japanese ancestry in Zuni DNA. No 13th century Japanese artifacts in the southwest. No archaeological trace of the voyage. The founder effect explains the biology, chance explains the words, and the crossing leaves no fingerprints. Broad studies of indigenous American ancestry consistently trace these populations back to ancient migrations out of Northeast Asia, across the Bering Land Bridge, many thousands of years ago, not to a medieval voyage from the Japanese islands. If a boatload of 13th century Japanese had truly merged with the ancestors of the Zuni, that event would be expected to leave a readable mark in the genome, and it is not there. The religious parallels, the third leg of Davis's argument, are the softest of all. Human cultures independently arrive at similar sacred ideas again and again, a center of the world, a set of sacred directions, an ordering of color and season. because these ideas answer needs that every settled people shares. Finding an echo of a sacred center in both Zuni and Japanese thought tells us something about human minds, not about a shared bloodline. So the theory, as a theory, does not survive. And yet notice what the debunk does not touch. It does not make Zuni any less of an isolate. It does not explain where the language came from. It removes Davis's answer while leaving her question standing exactly where it was, because that question belongs, first and most importantly, to the Zuni themselves. The account of Zuni origins that matters is not a book from the year 2000. It is the Zuni people's own history, carried in their oral tradition of emergence into this world and a long migration in search of the middle place, the center where they were meant to live, which they found and named Halona Idawana. To the Zuni, this is not a quaint legend to be decoded for hidden foreigners. It is history and identity, the account of how a people came to belong to a specific place, and it has been kept and retold with care across many generations. It is worth saying plainly that many Zuni and many scholars have found the Japanese theory not just unconvincing, but uncomfortable, because it takes a people's own detailed account of their origin and treats it as a code concealing someone else's story. The Zuni migration tradition is long, specific, and sacred. It describes emergence from the worlds below, a search led across the land, water that had to be crossed, signs that had to be read, and a final arrival at the true center of the world. It is not a vague memory. It is a structured history that Zuni religious life is still organized around today, set beside what linguistics can honestly say, and the two do not contradict each other so much as circle the same gap. The Zuni describe themselves as a people who arrived at their center from somewhere else after a long search. Linguistics describes Zuni as a language that arrived at its present form from a source no one can trace. Both point back toward origins that are genuinely distinct, genuinely deep, and genuinely unresolved. The obvious objection is the one worth answering plainly. Does the failure of the Japanese theory mean the Zuni are simply a normal Puebloan people, and there is no mystery? And the answer is no. The isolation is not Davis's invention. It is a real, measured fact of the language, and it still has no accepted explanation. The mystery outlived the wrong solution. None of that proves anything exotic. The likeliest truth is that Zuni is an isolate for the same reason other isolates exist, because the languages it was once related to have all vanished, leaving it as the last speaker of a family that time erased. That is not a story about Japan. It is a story about how much of the human past has simply been lost, but it means the enigma in Davis's title was real, even though her answer was not. Here is what nobody seriously disputes. Zuni is a language isolate connected to no other known language. The Zuni are biologically somewhat distinct from their neighbors. Nancy Yaw Davis really did assemble these facts into a Japanese origin theory and publish it in the year 2000. And linguists, geneticists, and archaeologists have examined that theory and set it aside. Those are the solid stones. Here is where the questions begin. We do not know where the Zuni language came from, or what languages it may once have been related to before they disappeared. We do not know the full, deep-time story of how the Zuni people came to sit, linguistically alone, at the center of the Pueblo world. And we may never know, because the evidence that would answer it, other related languages, may be gone for good, carried off by the same centuries that erased so many of the tongues once spoken across this continent. Walk into Zuni Pueblo today and you are standing in the middle place, a living community in western New Mexico where the Zuni language is still spoken, still taught, still carrying whatever history is folded inside it. The mesas, the ancestors named, are still on the horizon. The ceremonies still turn through the year. Zuni artists still work the silver and the stone that the Pueblo is known for across the Southwest. And children still learn to count and pray in a language that, as far as anyone can prove, no other human community has ever shared. And the language itself remains what it has always been, a voice that answers to no other, holding the record of an origin it has not yet given up. History and science are rarely settled by a single striking theory. They are assembled slowly, one careful study, one honest rejection, one preserved tradition at a time, and some of it stays out of reach. The Zuni Enigma sits in that unreachable zone, its wildest answer disproven, and its central question still open. The wrong answer, in the end, pointed at a real and stubborn question. Thank you for thinking this one through with me. If you want more of these, the kind that take a strange idea seriously and follow it all the way to the edge of the evidence, consider subscribing, because that is exactly what the next one does. Until then, a question worth sitting with. When a people are this different from everyone around them, and the easy explanation falls apart, what do we do with a mystery that refuses to close?